delegating up is when I take the Q10, the quarterly financials for a publicly traded company, and I give that off to our accountants and say, can you decipher this for me? Are we making a bad decision, right? Or are these guys solid? For our attorney, for our tax strategist, I'm like, I give them things, and whatever they come back to me with, I'm very good at just taking their action and making big decisions and making them quickly, right? I can make $5 million decisions by having 5 minutes of input from someone.
You're asking yourself, why am I doing this?
Smart people would know how to use all these different tools. They start with something small.
You'll never get your entire organization if you don't pull off operations. Don't give up.
It can be as small as that.
I think you guys are going to have our last today.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Delegate That podcast, where we discuss the art and science of delegation, business management, and leadership. Today, I am stoked to talk to Nathan Everson from North Dakota, where I was born at. So it was pretty interesting getting to chat with you a little bit before we started recording. But if you can, Nathan, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about what you do for business.
All right. So as you said, Adam, I'm currently based in Fargo, North Dakota. So right on the Minnesota border. If you hear the accent coming through, it's not my fault. My primary business right now is we invest in industrial real estate warehouses, typically single tenant, triple net properties. So we buy them, usually have partners on them. Sometimes it's my family, sometimes it's close friends or friends of friends. And then we just do the asset management on an ongoing basis throughout the years. I also moonlight as a corporate pilot. That was kind of my first career before I got into, I started in the pilot world, got out of that after a number of years, got into the restaurant business, sold out of that a few years ago, and I've been full-time in real estate ever since. So
interesting. Well, how does one go from a pilot to operating restaurant stuff? How did that transition happen?
Well, it was my back of the napkin math was like, when I was a pilot, I was like, kind of got to the point where I was flying a lot of rich people around privately. And I was like, how can I be the one that owns the airplane and has someone else fly me? Or how can I afford to own the airplane? And it's like, it's not by flying for others. So I was like, okay, next step is I need to become a business owner, and I need to have a business where I can like spread out geographically enough to be able to justify having that airplane as a business expense. I'm like, oh, restaurants, that's easy enough. It wasn't a great career move, but it was a career move nonetheless. And I actually started my first restaurant in the spring of 2012. At the exact same time, that was when I got into real estate. And so they both started out very small, and they kind of grew side by side in parallel into two full-time jobs. I got to the point where I had 7 restaurants. Our real estate portfolio started out with 1 building and, grew to the point where it was taking 40 plus hours a week from me too. So back in 2022, I ended up selling out of all of my restaurants to a former manager that used to work for me. And like I mentioned, just went full time into the real estate.
Do you feel overwhelmed with mundane tasks that eat up your valuable time? It's time to reclaim your schedule and focus on what truly matters. Get your time back with elite remote talent without the time zone hassle. Delegate $10 an hour tasks to focus on more $1,000 an hour tasks. Schedule your free strategy call at wisevas.io.
I would imagine like 7 restaurants, 40 hours of real estate. Like you said, you have 2 full-time jobs. How did you kind of pull off doing that? I mean, you started that in 2012, sold in 2022. So obviously there was some growth time in there. So as you were growing, how did you manage to accomplish all of that stuff? What size team did you end up building? Kind of walk me through what that looked like for you.
How did I do it? I'd say the short answer is not very well. On that and just a lot of stamina. I worked a lot in the beginning, especially the restaurants. Fortunately, we had a good general manager in each restaurant, and then I did have a business partner. She was amazing. And then we had a regional manager that managed all of our restaurants as well. So for probably the first 4 to 6 years, I was involved in inside of the restaurants a lot. After that, it was more outside behind the computer work. And so I could do it any time of day, really. As we were doing that on the real estate side of things, I was honestly, at that point, it was small enough that myself and one of my sisters were helping me out. And then I had another sister that would like fill in on some part-time stuff. We were just running our little family business. I wouldn't even call it a portfolio at that time. We were doing things like pen and paper rent rolls and write in paper checks. It was kind of silly. And then all of a sudden I woke up one day, I was like, wow, this is a real company and we need to make it professional and do so in a hurry. So that has now turned into, our management company where there's 6 of us working in it, part or full time. And
all right. So if you were to look back at it, would you have started doing it a little bit more professionally from the beginning? Or do you think that kind of slowly doing it and doing it in the, like the Excel sheets and all that and the paper checks was kind of sufficient enough to not have to worry about it? What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, we didn't hit any major. Actually, we did hit a major setback in 2017 that came close, brought me to my knees in real estate for probably 2 to 2.5 years. That was really a struggle, but we came through that. And like a lot of success stories, you come through it stronger, right? And more well equipped to handle future shocks. And it was a good wake up call for me that we do need to focus on putting some stop gaps in place. So would I change it? Yeah, I think of course. I mean, I would probably have a lot more wealth, a lot bigger portfolio today had I not been in the restaurants, because I heard someone explain it really well once where they said, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but you don't necessarily want to be a parallel entrepreneur, but a serial entrepreneur, right? Which is like, I was kind of doing the parallel entrepreneur deal where I was running a restaurant and building a real estate company side by side at the same time. And then I got those both to a point where they were kind of doing okay. And then pretty soon we started an aviation management company that I was running, and I was flying and, got my real estate license, and I was kind of doing everything side by side. And had I just had that crystal ball and the benefit of foresight, if I would have just focused on real estate, like back in 2012, really industrial wasn't a thing, right? Like everyone's doing multifamily, like everyone you hear of. It's only been, in my worldview, probably only the last few years where industrials become a talking point. Like I could add a 10-year head start on everyone and just picked off all kinds of insane deals for a long time. So I feel fortunate that I got the head start that I did, but now the cat seems to be out of the bag a little bit, and there's definitely a lot more competition.
Yeah, and I think competition can sometimes be good, but at the same point, man, oh man, it's nice to be able to just go in and get the pickings as much as you want, right?
Yeah.
So, but you mentioned that there were about a 2.5 year period where you kind of had some struggle to work through. What was it that caused that struggle, and what would you say? Because you mentioned that maybe you would change a couple things. What was it that caused the struggle, and what things would you have changed before that to prevent that from happening?
Okay, so what caused the struggle? And at this time, we were still just a family company. I didn't have any outside partners on any properties. So I was just managing our little family portfolio, which by that point, this was 2017, where it had grown to a decent size. We're cash flowing really well. So I would just keep rolling it into more and more properties. We had sold 2 properties in quick succession. I 1031 both of them. And I was looking all over North Dakota, and I just couldn't find anything that met our buy box. So at that point, I started looking all over the U.S. I found a property in a small town in Southern Virginia and kind of met everything we wanted. The price was right. It was about a $5 million purchase, which at that point was by far the largest purchase we had ever made. But we had a 12-year sale leaseback with a company that had been operating in the building at that point for 35 years, international company with operations on 5 different continents. I was like, oh, this all looks good. So we pay them $5 million, sign a 12-year lease. 7 months later, they go bankrupt. the $5 million disappears in a series of international wire transfers that no one can seem to track. And, we're sitting on a 200,000 square foot building, completely vacant and tied up in bankruptcy court. So that's what happened. How we would have prevented that, I don't know. I mean, I think could we have done better due diligence? Maybe, but when it's outright fraud, it's like kind of one of those black swan events that it's really hard to prepare for, where they just, they had some shell companies, and there's what do you call it? Fraudulent conveyance. Like, they have a duty to know that if you're 7 months away from bankruptcy or less, you can't sign a 12-year lease agreement. But due to the way they were structured, they were headquartered in California, a hedge fund, domiciled in New Hampshire, located in Virginia, with all their operations based in Denmark. And it was just like, it was this crazy web that none of the bankruptcy attorneys wanted to touch. So they basically, pulled it off.
So during the due diligence side of the house, like what sort of, I'm going to try to connect these a little bit, but what sort of due diligence do you do on one of your tenants that's in an industrial type of building, right? Well, how do you do the due diligence on that type of company? Because when we're, I've done a lot of apartments, so I understand, and everybody's, more than likely signed a lease to live in an apartment or a house or something along those lines. So they're doing a little bit of due diligence on you as the person signing for the house. Is okay. Are there any criminal background? Is there, do they have the financial income to be able to support this? But what about on a business? What sort of background are you doing on the business to know that they are capable of being able to get into a 12-year contract with you?
Now, and even then, obviously you're looking at historical financial performance, right? You don't want to see downward trends. Sometimes, honestly, it's really hard, even now, when you're buying bigger buildings, where you have, several of our buildings they have a publicly traded company as the tenant. And some of these companies, they're making acquisitions, right? And they're doing all this stuff. And it's like, it's really hard to follow their balance sheet and all the footnotes in their quarterly reporting and stuff, where it's like, well, we're showing a $400 million loss, but it's not really that. It's, this, that, and the other. And so I'm not an expert at that. I rely on, my wife is a CPA. She works with me, so she's always digging into the financials. We've got a good accounting team that works for us, third party, right? And they've got this brilliant guy that owns it. I have him look at it, everything. We're giving it to the bank saying, you guys do your due diligence, right? So I'm trying to put stopgaps in, because the way I look at things, right, as a real estate investor is way different than how the accountants look at it. So I'm delegating, if you will, a lot of that piece of it out to people that are smarter than me. From my position now, I'm looking, when we're buying buildings, especially if they have a tenant in place, we're looking for tenants that are in an industry that's somewhat recession proof, right? Like one of our buildings we just purchased a month ago was a window manufacturer. I'm like, well, through the ups and the downs, people are always going to need windows, right? It doesn't really matter if construction's booming or not. So I like stuff like that. I don't want to necessarily own a building where they're like manufacturing the walls for like the axe throwing parlors that seem to be popping up everywhere, because I'm like, if it's a fad industry, or if it's something that depends on like a construction boom, or depends on, some weak factor, it's just, you're putting all your eggs in one basket. So we're looking for more recession proof stuff. Either that is in an industry that can be backed by government subsidies, right? Like the agricultural sector, or like I said, things that just people need windows. Another building we own, they produce plastic bags, Ziploc bags, garbage bags, things like that. And it's like, well, again, recession or not, they're probably going to be there.
Yeah, everybody still needs to throw their trash out. There's not much you can do about that. So everybody still needs to put a sandwich in a plastic bag. So very good. So you've done all this. You kind of built a bunch of different things, and obviously you've learned a lot over your time of running multiple different businesses, flying all sorts of places, doing all sorts of stuff. So the way you're set up now, how have you kind of built it to allow you? We talked before we started recording. You're going to be taking like a 2-month hiatus, kind of on a road trip with your family. So how have you set yourself up now to be able to let these things kind of manage themselves, let them run without you to be able to go off on a 2-month vacation with your family?
Yeah. So now we've actually put a lot of systems in place, I would say. So as I mentioned before, we were back in the early days, a lot of things were being done with like paper checks and, not computerized. Now everything is obviously cloud-based. We're using AI a lot. In fact, of our team of 6, there's 2 of us in North Dakota, 2 are based in Brazil, 2 are based in Colombia. So we're a very international team. And because of that, everyone is just, very good at technology. Like I can have a conference call driving down the interstate and get just as much done as if we're sitting in an office together. So we use systems like Loom. We use Google Meet extensively for video conferencing. All of our stuff is managed through Google Drive and Notion. Right. So just that connectivity. And then we are not AI experts, but I feel like we're using AI above the curve, if you will, just to try and integrate all of this stuff. So we can run lean and mean and use technology to our advantage to be able to do that. And then kind of tying all of that together is, we follow the traction model, run L10 meetings every week. We have our quarterly meeting next week. And so because of that, when you empower your team and then you have accountability through, the traction model, it just allows me a little bit more flexibility than I would have had, 6-7 years ago.
The implementation of systems is something that needs to be done regardless of where you're at. No matter how big your team is, have the systems to be able to set things up right so that you don't miss emails, you don't miss bills, you don't miss any of those things. You don't miss a tenant getting ready to potentially need to be redoing their contract. So as you were kind of building out all of these systems, like you mentioned Notion and Loom. So, with these systems, how did you initially start to set them up? Where did you see that you needed it, and then how has that transformed since you've been kind of using them? Especially, let's say Notion. Especially, how did you kind of start with that, and then how has it transitioned over time?
Well, fortunately, some of the people on my team, they're way more tech savvy than I am. So I kind of gave them the ball to run with it. We've tried out a number of things that just didn't work for us, right? I've used Todoist for a while. We ended up scrapping that. We used Otter Notes for a while, scrapped that. And I don't like to get too fancy. For me, Google Drive is kind of where I live. I'm actually kind of a Luddite still when it comes to using Notion. I'm not great at it, but my team loves it. And I'm like, hey, as long as you guys know how to access everything, I'm just like, I'm on WhatsApp sending out, hey, find this file, email it to me, right? Because I need things in email or in Google Drive. Otherwise, I'm not great at editing or finding them. But for them, most of them are younger and they're just super tech savvy. They found Notion. They loved it. They love how everything is interconnected, right? So when you update one area, it updates across a number of different platforms or files. And so I gave it to them, and so far it's been successful. And they set it all up. They've created Loom videos to teach me how to use it. And yeah, it's been a really great tool for us, especially for the cost.
It's one thing that we've talked a lot about on this podcast is folks using Loom videos to help teach the people that they're delegating to. But I think that when you're at a stage where you're hiring the people that know the things better than you, I think it's phenomenal that you are the one receiving the Loom videos to teach you how to use the systems for your team, right? And it just kind of shows that once you get to a certain spot, and if you're hiring correctly, you're hiring folks that can do things better than you. There are certain things that, nobody's going to respond to an email exactly like you're going to respond to an email. So that's not exactly what I'm saying by somebody doing something better than you, but the actual tasks of getting things done, they should be able to accomplish better than you, quicker than you, because you can be focused on all the other stuff. So while they're all doing all their things in Notion and Loom and whatnot, I'm assuming what you're doing is like bigger picture thinking, talking to building more relationships, doing that sort of stuff. What does your day-to-day look like while everybody else is kind of working the behind the scenes on all those systems?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say that it is that big picture, visionary, that capital allocation and nurturing relationships with our partners. So that's my primary focus, because here's what I've realized just recently, actually. There's two ways to delegate. You can delegate up, which I'm very good at, and you can delegate down, if you will. And what I mean by that is delegating up is when I take the Q10, the quarterly financials for a publicly traded company, and I give that off to our accountants and say, can you decipher this for me? Are we making a bad decision, right? Or are these guys solid? For our attorney, for our tax strategist, I'm like, I give them things, and whatever they come back to me with, I'm very good at just taking their action and making big decisions and making them quickly, right? I can make $5 million decisions by having 5 minutes of input from someone. What I'm not as good at is delegating down, like to my executive assistant, our admin assistant, those tasks, like you mentioned, like responding to an email, right? And that's like, maybe that's still that micromanager part of me. And part of it is just, I think it's like the way you grow up, right? Where I grew up very blue collar, neither of my parents went to college. They were high school educated. My mom, for most of our life, was a homemaker. She also worked in a restaurant as a waitress. My dad had an oil and gas company our whole life, and we just kind of financially got by. We struggled, right? And in Western North Dakota, you're judged by like how hard you work, not about how smart you work. At least in the 80s and 90s when I grew up, it was like, who can work 90 hours? Who can work 100? It's just like man on man. You take your shirt off and you get stuff done. And so for me to grow up in that environment, and now I have people around me where I'm like, hey, I want you to schedule these appointments, or I want you to write emails for me. Part of it is like, you still feel a little bit guilty by doing that. And part of it is just like that micromanager where they say something, you just cringe. I'm like, and that's the part where I've really been focused over the last year of, okay, let them make mistakes. It's okay. Even if it costs money, it's okay. Use that then I'll send a Loom. I'm like, hey, great job answering that email, or great job setting this appointment. Here's what I would have done different. I'm not chastising you. I just want to give you feedback. Try and incorporate this next time. Boom, you send the Loom, and they get a little bit better next time. You might cringe a little bit less. And so that's something I'm not great at yet, is delegating down, but it's something that I'm working on actively.
And I mean, that takes a lot of practice to get comfortable doing, because like you said, if you're in that mindset where, I need to be able to do all of this, I need to be able to, but it's getting ourselves in the right brain, on the right brain waves to be able to say, okay, these are the things that I am really good at. Like in EOS, when you're looking at some of the stuff, it's like, okay, I'm really good at it. So I'm good at it. And it's and I like to do it, right? Are you really good at it and you like to do it? Stay in that square. Get everything else out, delegate everything else out that doesn't meet those criteria. And it's so hard because we want to be the ones who are responding to our emails because nobody else responds the way I do. I want to be able to look at it. I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to do that. And it's really sad to kind of let some of that go. But once we get ourselves in the right state of mind to say, okay, these are what I'm really good at, how I can really help this company grow is to do these things that I'm good at and that I like to do. So what sort of work do you think you need to do in your own life, in your own, if you were to sit down and just kind of pencil out what it looks like, what sort of work do you need to do to be able to trust just kind of handing that sort of stuff off and delegating down, as you called it, to be able to free you up to doing only the stuff that you really enjoy doing and that you're really good at?
Honestly, what I've found like the most therapeutic for me is I'm like a light switch, right? I'm not one of those guys. I don't feel the need to work 80 hours a week anymore. I got over that a long time ago. I'm like, I'm never going to work as hard as my dad or brother, and I'm okay with that, right? I gave up that ghost. But I've noticed like if I'm around, I can't just sit still. Right. And I don't have to be working, but I'm constantly reading, listening to podcasts, doing something. I've got to stay active. The only way I've found where I can like flip that light switch off is when I take international trips. Right. There's just something about me as soon as we cross the pond, so to speak. I can, like, I've taken trips for a couple of weeks where I don't even bring my phone with. I just leave it at home and I can just totally unplug. I'm like, hey, don't call me unless the building burns down. And if it does, here's the number to the insurance company.
Well, then you've figured out the system to be able to delegate that down. Like if you're able to take those trips and not have to worry about it, what is it that prevents you from fully letting that go and just being like, no, like you guys got this, make it happen?
I think it's like that need to be productive, and it drives me crazy because like I've identified the issue and I still can't let it go. Right. And I think so, this is paraphrasing a little bit, but Simon Sinek talks about it where he's like, you don't own a vehicle simply to put fuel into it, right? The vehicle is a tool for you to get to a destination. And it should be the same way with our businesses. And I see too many people, myself included, where it's like, we have a business and we don't really have a purpose behind it. It's just like what keeps us busy. That's like buying a car just to simply put fuel into it. It's ridiculous, right? So what is our bigger purpose behind it? And I think where I'm landing on for me is like time freedom is so important. And sometimes I love real estate, right? So I spend a lot of my time thinking about it, talking about it, doing it because that's what I love to do. But I'm trying to build a lifestyle, not just for me, but also for the people that work with me, where it's like, guys, we have this amazing job, this amazing opportunity where for the most part, I don't care when you work. You can work at 3 a.m. till 6 a.m. and then go to the beach for half the day and come home and work for a few more hours, right? Like we have this super cool opportunity in front of us. You have to learn how to balance it and manage it to get stuff done. And that works well for me in my life, my light switch personality, where it's like, I'll just work like crazy for 3 days and then take 6 days off or whatever it may be. I know what I got to get done. So I think I'm getting there, Adam. I'm getting better all the time, but man, I don't know when I'm home, it's kind of a combination of guilt and love for the game and just an internal drive where I probably work more than I should and probably get myself into trouble because I can't just sit still.
I think that you're obviously not the only person in that boat in the entrepreneur world. That tends to be kind of the way that our brains work. It's hard to shut that thing off. It's part of the beast. But I think that's you hit on something there, like the need to be productive at the beginning, and there's a difference between being productive and feeling productive. Sometimes we feel productive when we're knocking out tasks and making sure that we're hitting check marks, and there's a difference between being productive when we're actually doing the things that grow. And I think to lead into that, you mentioned also, you have to have a purpose of getting in the car. You don't just fill it up on fuel. And I really love that analogy. So I'm glad you brought that up because, when you're creating a business, when you're running a business, there has to be a vision of going forward. So you mentioned running on Traction, EOS, that sort of thing. How is did you sit down and kind of create your vision inside of Traction, like your 10-year vision and building out all of those goals and all of that sort of stuff? Did you kind of create all of that with your team?
Yeah, we did. And like I mentioned, we've got our quarterly meeting scheduled for next week. So we go through our VTO. I'm always on the fence about that, like between setting aggressive goals where you want to keep stretching and keep shooting the moon, and then also like just being where your feet are, right? And I've heard it from both sides. Like Naval Ravikant, he's a perfect example where he's like, oh, those goals are ridiculous or doing all this stuff. He's like, I just kind of do what I like to do when I wake up and what I feel like. Like I refuse to use a calendar, and if I if I feel like going to the dinner that night, I'll just schedule it and go. I'm like, oh man, that would give me such anxiety. So we set some big goals in our VTO, and like we're basically on track to hit them. On the other hand, I'm like, I don't want a big company, right? I don't want to be a $1 billion real estate company, because more money, more problems. I'm seeing that the older I get, and it's like, I want to get this to a good point and then just optimize it and kind of keep leveling up. So have 20-ish assets in our portfolio, but then you start trading out the older ones or the smaller ones, and you just keep leveling up. So if you do that and you have 20 assets and they're all, $8 to $12 million, now all of a sudden you're sitting on a $200 million portfolio without a tremendous amount of stress, and something that you can run with a very small, tight-knit team, right? I don't want 40 employees. I've been there before. I've had 100 employees under my, payroll before, and it's not a fun place to be when you don't know everyone's name and when you have a lot of turnover and just a lot of internal issues. And so I love the size of our 6-person team. We can expand, we can take on more with what we have. I just don't want to get too big for my britches.
I really appreciate that, because, especially in the type of world that you and I are kind of running in, everybody's always growth. And I felt like the odd man out, because I was looking at that myself for a long time. Growth. I want to build all this. And then I started to do exactly what you and I talked a little bit about before we started recording, but also you're mentioning now, is where is it that I really want to go? What are my actual goals for me and my family? Like maybe my growth mode, like true growth mode, actually happens when my kids retire, when my kids are out of the house and it's just my wife and I. And then, but for now, maybe I get to focus on just being more of a dad, and get to, yeah, sure, I run some things here, I do some things there. But man, oh man, do I get to be involved with my kids. So, I love that you're kind of in that space where you're going, hey, let me really know what it is that I truly want, and how I'm going to grow, or stay the same, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you have all your needs checked. There's nothing wrong with just kind of sitting there, coasting, making sure that everything's going in the right spot. You got the right team, you're taking care of everybody. You're just kind of doing what you got to do to make sure you are accomplishing what you need for you and your family. And I love that that's kind of where you're at. It's one of those, though, work through it, write it down, make sure you're happy about it. I'm talking both to you and anybody listening, right? Work through it, understand what it is that you're looking for, write it down. Like, think through it. Is this truly what I want to be doing? When you're in a group of people that are always grow, like a lot of times people write down that they want to grow because everybody else is, not because they actually want to. So, what is it that you're striving for?
Well, I think the hardest time sometimes is to sit still and just be okay with where you're at. And that's my goal for the year, is just be present, right? I've got 3 young kids. I've got a 4th on the way in less than a month. And yeah, thank you. And to me, that's like priority number 1, obviously. I mean, a lot of people say that, but I've always been a big believer in like having mentors and looking up to people, right? Even in the real estate world or aviation world, it doesn't matter what it is. We're always looking for these mentors, like, hey, how do I level up? How do I go from having 8 doors to 800? Right. And we just like soak up this knowledge. But the one thing that like people consistently say, like almost without exception, is, man, I wish I would have spent more time with my kids when they were growing up. Right. I don't like, it doesn't matter, dude, if you die with 70 million in the bank or 50 million, does it really matter? Not at all. But all these guys, like over and over and over, are just kicking themselves for working too much or ripping apart their family because they were never home, or, whatever it may be. And I'm like, I refuse to do that. I don't care, financially, we're very comfortable. I don't need anything else on that front. So I want to, make sure that I am prioritizing our kids. And like, I've taken that message to heart, right? Where it's like, you have those 18 summers with your kids, if you're lucky. Right. And so to me, that's where I am good at being that light switch and just turning off sometimes and going and taking a 2-month road trip with my family and load them all in the RV and go explore. Right. And that's my happy place. The business is just a tool for us to do that.
Absolutely love it. I think that's a phenomenal way to kind of wrap this up. I mean, I've got 3 kids running around the house. You've got 3 kids, soon to be 4, running around the house. It does not get any better than passing the legacy on to them. And that's one thing that nobody can delegate out. You cannot delegate out being a dad. You cannot delegate out being a mom. It's not possible. Be a mom, be a dad. Know that that's where your legacy comes from. And I try to tell people that all the time. Like, hey, what good is $100 million, business if you lost your family in the process? I'd much rather have a $10 million business and be a present father than have a $100 million business and not know my kids, or have my kids not know me. So I really appreciate you mentioning that, Nathan. So if anybody likes what they're hearing and they're like, hey, I just want to chat with Nathan more, what's the best way for them to reach out to you and get a hold of you?
I'm not great at social media, so you can probably find me on there and I might respond to you in 3 or 4 months. So the best way is just, you could go to my website. It's blacktailcompanies.com. There's a button on there where you can it says schedule lunch or schedule a meeting with me. Just email that. It'll come right through to me. I'd love chatting with fellow entrepreneurs or people that want to be entrepreneurs. So I'm happy to set up a call and jump on a Zoom with anyone. And that's probably the easiest way to schedule it, would be right through our website. And it won't go into some ether. Like I said, we have a small team. So if you reach out to me on there, I promise you'll hear back from us right away.
Awesome. Well, Nathan, it was awesome to get to chat with you. I'm really looking forward to hopefully getting to meet you in person at a GoBundance event, and maybe even having you on the BizDad podcast, like I mentioned about. So I'd love to talk to you over there as well. But for everybody listening, please like and subscribe, comment below. Tell us what your favorite part of the podcast was. Tell us what questions you would have asked Nathan if you were sitting in my seat. And then, looking forward to seeing everybody on the next show. I thank you again, Nathan, for jumping on, and we will talk to everybody later.
Thanks, Adam.